What is going on, investors? Hopefully, you guys had a great day out there. Time to talk about the online marketplace stock Etsy, ticker symbol ETSY. The company reported their earnings yesterday. We'll get into them in a moment, but the stock was rejected today by about $20 per share, down about 9%. The stock is rebounding a little bit. We'll talk about it from a technical perspective. This stock was on a monster move. This was like a $30 stock in March and April of last year, and it has just rallied, and it's rallied hard. A lot of that has to do with when things got shut down. One of the biggest products people were flocking to Etsy for was actually mask. And even in their guidance and their financials, they exclude the mask benefit. So many people went onto Etsy and bought masks, not just to buy, but also to sell as well. Obviously, Etsy is a two-way platform where you have consumers come there to buy things, but also sellers come to Etsy to kind of fill out the portfolio. Think about it just basically like eBay. Very similar. I don't want to compare it to eBay, not necessarily, but a very similar idea where you have sellers, individual sellers selling things and buyers coming to buy those things. Now, obviously, Etsy operates in its own kind of unique space where it's like handmade goods, so to speak. And so it does have a competitive advantage from that place. And that's where people go to find those types of things. Now, let's jump over to the second quarter financial summary. These came out yesterday. We got a 3 months ended here. 2020's right-hand column. The most recent quarter is the left-hand column. I wanted to look at some high-level stuff here, and then we'll go into the financials a little bit more in depth. The high-level stuff is GMS, which I think is gross merchandise sales, and that's basically the total number of dollars spent on Etsy. And that is up 13% year over year. Last year we're sitting about 2.7 billion. Now you're up over $3 billion. The other thing that I want to show you on this is active number of sellers. That went from, I guess that's 3.1 million sellers up to 5.2. And take a look at active buyers. It makes me almost want to open up a Etsy. I don't use Etsy from a seller's perspective. I am in the e-commerce business. I don't have products that I list on Etsy. I guess I could, because take a look at this. You went from 60 million buyers up to 90 million buyers. That's quite a gap between buyers and sellers, showing you that there's a lot of buyers on this platform. I don't want to say there's not a lot of sellers, but certainly not as many as you've got, exponentially more buyers. So that is good if you want to sell on there. Now you got percent mobile of the gross merchandise sales. And what I noticed too is from an international perspective, you're getting a little diversification with Etsy, okay? You got 41% of the gross merchandise sales is actually coming from the international market. It's almost 50-50, okay? Not quite, it's like 60-40, but that's actually pretty cool. You're getting a little bit of exposure to that. That's if you want that type of thing. Now, a little bit deeper dive into these revenues. So we've got our 3 months ended here. What I talked about was gross merchandise sales going from 2.7 billion to 3 billion. Now, obviously, Etsy only takes a percentage of that. Works exactly like Amazon and in eBay, where you sell your items on there and then they take Etsy, in this case, takes a small percentage or a certain percentage of that, and then they leave the seller with the rest. So revenue, this is the money that Etsy actually takes in terms of selling fees and other fees that they administer on the platform, went from 428 up to 528. Look, not explosive growth, not growth that we haven't seen from other companies. That is actually 23% growth. But notice our cost of revenue didn't grow that much, okay? 111 up to 148. That gives us gross profit off this 528 in revenue. That's 528 million. We made $380 million. So you want to check off a box on Etsy. First of all, increasing our revenue, 23%. Would say that's probably on the low end of a lot of the, I would factor Etsy as almost kind of like a tech stock. I would factor that in kind of towards the low end, but look, really, really high gross margins on this one, okay? $380 million off $528 million worth of revenue. Those are fantastic margins. Now we got other expenses here. Marketing came in at 167, up a little bit from 114. Product development up a little bit from 45 to 61. General administrative also up a little bit from 38 to 61. Our total operating expenses went from 198 to 290. So that's where some of the profit or income from operations kind of bled out from this company. So yes, we grew our gross profit, we grew our top line, but unfortunately our income from operations actually went down. And I think that is kind of what investors are seeing, because we talked about at the top of the show, the stock was down about 9%. And look, these numbers aren't that that bad, and we are profitable. Everything went up. All the numbers across the board basically went up, except our income from operations went from 119 down to 90, and that is because, for the most part, our expenses accelerated. Take a look at this from a cash flow perspective here in a second and see if some of that or a lot of that is stock-based compensation. Those types of things you can factor in. Now, net income, when you factor in a positive income tax benefit, last year we had to pay some income taxes. This year we had a benefit, so our net income actually ticked up a little bit. But that is why I'm trying to teach you here on the channel how to be a really good investor. And what I would do is often, it's not in every scenario, but 9 times out of 10, I would say income from operations is about where I stop on these companies, because tax rates and tax things change all the time. Interest rates change, those types of things, other income, Etsy selling investments, buying investments, all that stuff can change, and that can really impact net income. The other thing that can change is the diluted number of shares outstanding. Went from 134 million outstanding diluted shares up to 144. So that'll affect your EPS, okay? Based on the number of shares, you're dividing this net income number by the diluted or the basic number of shares outstanding, and you get these EPS numbers. And so all this stuff can change with the wind, okay? Whereas income from operations gives you a very, very clear picture of what happened at Etsy. And for the most part, we saw nice top line growth, but we saw our income from operations slip. That is because, for the most part, expenses rose in excess of our revenue growth. Now, for 6 months ended here, we get a view of cash flows, and this is what I talked about. So we pulled down a net income number of 242. That's sitting over here. Our right-hand column was for 6 months. So we get this 242. It really was a quarterly thing, right? Because we see this income from operations went from 144 last year for 6 months up to 240. So they did a nice job growing their income from operations over the last 6 months or so. It's really just the last 3 months where we've seen a little bit of a pullback. And I'll be honest with you, it being in the e-commerce business as long as I had, this summertime back to school, unless you're selling those types of things, it tends to be a little bit slower. And obviously things pick up in Q3, and even more obviously in Q4 when you have holidays and things like that and Christmas. Sales on Etsy and platforms like this pick up wildly. And so it could just be one of those down quarters. So we'll talk about this from a technical perspective in a minute. This could be maybe an amazing buy the dip opportunity. You got 2020 right-hand column, 2021. This is 6 months cash flows. Talked about how you get to add back in things like stock-based compensation. Came in at $47 million. That's a lot, okay? You got depreciation, amortizations, some credit losses as well. All things being considered, our net cash provided by operating activities came in at 270. I'd love to see this on a quarterly basis, because this is for the last 6 months, and we saw over the last 6 months, the trends were a little bit better, at least from an operating income perspective for this company, whereas quarter over quarter, things deteriorated a little bit, and I'd be interested to dive into the quarter to see how that was. Now, this company is still raising money, which when we look, it's wild. I don't want to say it's wildly profitable, but this is a very, very profitable company, okay? And they'd have to really do a lot of bad things to screw this up, but they're still raising money, like $1 billion in a convertible note. When you come up here to the balance sheet, they've got $2 billion in cash, another $400 million in short-term securities, some receivables and things as well. You got total current assets, $2.7 billion. Total liabilities, every single liability, including lease payments, long-term debt, all that stuff on this company is sitting at $2.7 billion. So executives are really padding the balance sheet. I'm sure they're doing it at relatively favorable terms. So it's not something I'm going to blame them for, but they are diluting you as a shareholder from 134 million up to 144 million. And if you got convertible notes sitting on the balance sheet, which we do, and convertible notes sitting down here from the cash flows, you got to expect maybe those notes will convert at some point here pretty soon. If they haven't already, you might even see more dilution over at Etsy for, I don't want to say no reason, but not necessarily a great reason. Because again, this company is profitable from an operating perspective, from a net income perspective. Everything's pretty good. It checks a lot of boxes over at Etsy. Now, from a technical perspective, the stock's been on a monster run. We talked about it. It bottomed out here at 40. Then people realized, well, everybody's buying masks on Etsy right now. And they had a phenomenal performance over the course of shutdowns and those types of things, especially as people were acquiring masks. People people were buying lots of those things off of Etsy. Now, it's taken a reasonable drop, okay? It came up here, it peaked out officially up at 240. I guess that's probably where you could push this up to, is right around here to 240. But once it got to 240, sellers stepped in a major way. This stock came all the way down to 161. Now, we popped up a little bit, but we were not able to get back up to these highs. So this uptrend line that I drew in here, this is actually a weekly chart here. I want to stress that each one of these bars represents a week of time and not normally kind of the daily view that we tend to look at here on the channel. I stretch it out to weekly just because it gives you an idea. The monster move for many, many, many weeks, this stock just trended up without hesitation, and now we've finally hesitated and we started to go sideways. Now, going sideways with Etsy is not at all a bad thing. This has got a $24 billion market cap on this one. And look, that's a forward P of about 56. It's not completely out of whack. You compare it to like an eBay, it's certainly overvalued compared to an eBay, but compared to an Amazon, it's probably relatively fair valued or undervalued. So depending on who you compare it to, Etsy's not necessarily wildly overvalued. So if you can consolidate, I don't think that these revenue numbers and these profit numbers are going to get a whole lot worse. That's going to allow Etsy to kind of grow into this valuation. You get another strong Q4. And look, trends come in and out of Etsy, okay? It was mask in 2020, but there was other trends that Etsy benefited from in the past as well. And certainly as you have things eventually, hopefully, cross our fingers, right, start to reopen, you'll have more parties and things like that. The sellers on Etsy will evolve, okay? People on Etsy that were selling masks can easily pivot. I don't want to say easily, but they can pivot and sell other things, whatever might be in favor. So you're probably seeing a transition from the sellers that were selling masks. Now maybe they have to pick up another item or other things to sell. And so all things being considered, things are looking okay at Etsy. I'd like to see it if I were to buy these shares. It's sitting here at 183. We're sitting in what I see is the start of one of these, start of kind of a downtrend. And I'd wait to see this play out. If you can come back down here and get shares at 160, that has acted as a level of support. That's about $20 lower than where the stock is now. On the bullish side, you're really looking for a break above this 240. You can look at charts like Facebook. When you're in sideways consolidation, take a look. Facebook, sideways consolidating. That's kind of what we're doing here with Etsy, right? It looks like the start potentially of sideways consolidation. Well, how do you break out of sideways consolidation? You break above the previous highs, which in Facebook case was at 300. You break above 300. This thing went to 362 in a hurry, like in a matter of a month or two. Etsy, same type of story. Okay, if you're very bullish this stock, I wouldn't really get too excited until you got well above $1 or $2, $3, $4, $5 over 240, and then you probably confirm that with a secondary candle up above that. That could mean that, look, sellers have dried up and this one could be in rally mode. Now, if for some reason this thing comes down, the markets come down, Etsy gets really bearish, whatever it is, you break below 160 on there, man, there's candles here to support it, but this thing could get in a downtrend in a hurry. But that, in my opinion, would create some buying opportunities, because from a financial perspective, gross margin perspective, operating income perspective, yes, the most recent quarter not looking that great, but if you stretch it out to 6 months, paints a little bit better story. And look, maybe we go, I don't want to say this, but maybe we go back into restriction modes. I don't want to say the L word, the lockdown mode. Maybe we go back into that, and then all of a sudden everybody has to wear a mask again, go buy mask again, and that obviously would be very bullish for a stock like Etsy, because if you were like me, you've either lost a few masks or you've thrown them away thinking, wow, man, maybe I won't ever need this again. And maybe you will. We'll see what happens. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to tell you one way or another on this program. I'm just giving it to you from the perspective of an Etsy investor, and that could be bullish for Etsy. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back again soon with more. Good luck with your investments.